Graph page 751. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and our last headword was fame, newer type of lesson. Okay, so let's
Yes.
start with revision. Ready?
Sure.
Okay, let me just scroll down. Okay, here we go. First question. When do we use the expression may as well or might as well? When do we use the expression may as well or might as well? We use the
We use
expressions
the
may as
expressions
well
may
or
as
might
well
as well
or might as
when we
well
are suggesting
when we are
something,
suggesting
not
something,
because we think
not because we
it is a
think
great idea,
it is a great
but
idea,
because
but
we
because
cannot think of
we
anything
cannot think of
better to
anything
do.
better to do.
Wait, give me an example. Give me an example, please. It's raining and cold
It's raining
outside.
and cold
We
outside.
may as well
We
stay at
may as
home
well stay
and
at
watch
home
a film on
and
TV.
watch a film on TV.
Where if you had bought a ticket for a music festival, but then the event was canceled at the last moment on account of bad weather, do you think you'd be able to get a refund? If you had bought a ticket for a music festival, but then the event was canceled at the last moment on account of bad weather, do you think you'd be able to get a refund? Yes or no?
You know,
If I had bought
if
a
I
ticket
had bought a
for a
ticket
music festival,
for a music
but then
festival,
the event
but
was
then the
canceled
event
at
was
the last
cancelled
moment
at the last
on
moment
account of bad
on
weather,
account of bad
I don't
weather,
think I'd
I
be
don't
able
think I'd be
to get a
able
refund.
to get a refund.
Very good. After eating your lunch each day, do you generally feel more energetic or less energetic? After eating your lunch each day, do you generally feel more energetic or less energetic? After eating my
After
lunch
eating
each
my
day,
lunch each
I
day,
generally
I
feel
really feel less energetic.
very good. What am I doing? What am I doing? You're breathing.
You are breathing.
And what comes out of our mouths when we breathe? And what comes out of our mouths when we breathe? Breath comes out
Breath comes
of
out
our mouth
of our
when
mouth
we breathe.
when we breathe.
Right, how long can you hold your breath for? How long can you hold your breath for? I can hold my breath
I can
for.
breath for about 1 minute.
How do people get out of breath? How do people get out of breath? People get out of
People
breath
out of breath,
through running, climbing the
running,
stairs,
climbing the stairs,
etc.
etc.
Very good. What does the idiom lucky break mean? What does the idiom lucky break mean? The idiom
The
lucky break
idiom luck
means
break
a
means
piece of good luck,
a piece of good
usually
luck,
following a
usually
period
followed a
of
period
little or no
of
success.
little or no success.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. We had to hitchhike,
We had to
but no
hitchhike,
one stopped for
but no
us
one
all
stopped
morning.
for us all
Then
morning.
we had a lucky
Then
break.
we had a lucky
Someone
break.
picked us up
Someone picked
and
us
took
up
us all the way to the city.
and took us all the way to the city.
Very good. Okay, next. Give me an example of the present perfect continuous used when there's evidence now of a recent activity. Give me an example of the present perfect continuous used when there's evidence now of a recent activity. Look at David.
Look at
He's
David.
covered in mud.
He's covered in
I think
mud.
he's been
I
working
think
in
he's
his garden.
working in the garden.
Very good. How can we tell when somebody's been running a lot? How can we tell when somebody's been running a lot? We can tell
We
when
can tell
somebody's
when
been running a
somebody's
lot
been running a
because
lot
they're breathing
because
heavily.
they're breathing heavily.
Very good. When we arrive at someone's house, how can we tell if they've recently been cooking? When we arrive at someone's house, how can we tell if they've recently been cooking? When we arrive
When we
at
arrive
someone's
at
house,
someone's
we can
house,
tell
we can
if they've
tell
recently
if
been
they
cooking
recently cooking
because we can smell the food.
or we can smell the food.
Very good. Give me an example of the past perfect continuous used in the same way. Give me an example of the past perfect continuous used in the same way, please. When I walked
When I
into the
walked,
living room,
hmm?
when I walk into
When
the
I
living
walk
room,
in into
into the living room,
into the living room,
both the children
all the
look
children
really angry.
really angry.
It was clear
It
they
was
had been
clear they
arguing.
had been arguing.
Very good. When considering the price of a meal in a restaurant, do you take into account such things as the service charge and the waiter's tip? When considering the price of a meal in a restaurant, do you take into account such things as the service charge and the waiter's tip? Yes or no?
No,
When considering
when
the price
considering
of a
the
meal
price of a
in a
meal
restaurant,
in a
I don't
restaurant,
take into
I don't
account
take into
such
account
as
such as
The service charge
the service
and the
charge
waiter's tip.
and the waiter's chip.
Very good. What part of my finger's this? What part of my finger's this? That's the tip of your
That's the
finger.
tip of your finger.
Very good. What do we say when we are trying to think of a word or a name that we know well but we cannot remember it immediately? What do we say when we are thinking or trying to think of a word or a name that we know well but we cannot remember it immediately? When we are trying
When we
to
are
think of a
trying
word
to think of a
or a
word
name that
or a
we know
name
well
that we know
but we
well,
cannot remember
but
it
we cannot
immediately,
remember it
we say
immediately,
it's on the
we
tip of
say it
our
on the
tongue.
tip of our tongue.
Ragged. When you're buying something like a new phone or watch, do you have trouble making up your mind which one to buy? When you're buying something like a new phone or a watch, do you have trouble making up your mind which one to buy? Yes or no? When
Yes,
I'm buying
when I
something
buying
like a new
something
phone
like
or
a new
watch,
phone or
I have
watch,
trouble
I have
making up
trouble
my mind
making up my
which
mind
one to
which
buy.
one to buy.
What would happen if you wash some delicate clothes in a washing machine at high temperature? What would happen if you wash some delicate clothes in a washing machine at high temperature? If I washed
If I
some delicate
washed some
clothes
delicate
in a
clothes
washing machine
in a washing
at a high
machine
temperature,
under high
they would
temperature,
get
they
damaged
will get
or
damaged
become smaller.
or become smaller.
Very good. Do people behave differently from how they normally do when they think they're not being observed by others? Do people behave differently from how they normally do when they think they're not being observed by others? Yes or no?
Yes,
People behave
people
differently
behave
from
differently
how they
from
normally
how
do
they normally
when they
do
think
when they think
they're not being
they're
observed
not being
by
observed
others.
by others.
Why do you think this is? Why do you think this is? I think this
I
is
think this
because
because people have different senses, feelings, and personalities,
very
etc.
good. Okay. Does a detective need to have a good powers of observation? Does a detective need to have good powers of observation? Yes, a detective
Yes, a
needs to
detective
have
needs to
good
have
powers of
good
observation.
powers of observation.
Very good. Do you think it's right for governments to spend public money on preserving historic buildings? Or do you think public money should be spent in other ways? Do you think it's right for governments to spend public money on preserving historic buildings? Or do you think public money should be spent in other ways? I think
I think
it's right
it's right
for
to
governments
spend for
to
government
spend public
to
money
spend public
on
money
preserving
on
historic
preserving
buildings.
historic
Very
buildings.
good. What's a pole? What's a pole? A pole
A
is the
pole
foot of an
is the
animal
foot of an
which
animal
has claws
which has
like which has
cloth,
claws
a
like
claws like
that of a cat,
that of a cat,
a dog, a
a
lion,
dog, a
etc.
lion, etc.
Very good. What's a wooden hut? What's a wooden hut? A wooden hut
A wooden
is a
hat
hut made of
is a
wood.
hat made of wood.
What's a woolen hat? What's a woolen hat? A woolen hat
A wooden
is a
hat
hat made of
is a
wool.
hat made of wool.
What's a silk dress? What's a silk dress? A silk dress
A silk
is a
dress
dress
is
made
a
of silk.
dress made of silk.
What's silken hair? What's silken hair? Silken hair
Silken
is
hair
hair which
is a
is soft
hair
and
which
smooth
is soft and
like
smooth
silk.
like silk.
What's golden skin? What's golden skin? Golden skin is
Golden
skin
skin
that
is
looks like
skin that
gold
looks
in
like
color.
golden color.
What's a gold watch? What's a gold watch? A gold watch
A gold
is a
watch
watch made of
is a
gold.
watch made of gold.
Very good. Do you have English lessons every day or every other day? Do you have English lessons every day or every other day? I have English
I
lessons.
have English lessons almost every day.
Very good. If you notice somebody struggling to get a pushchair onto a bus, would you assist them? If you notice somebody struggling to get a pushchair onto a bus, would you assist them? Yes or no?
Hmm. Yes, of
If
course.
I notice
If you
somebody
notice somebody
struggling to get a
struggling
pushchair
to get a
onto a
pushchair
bus,
onto a
I'd
bus,
assist
I
them.
assist them.
Very good. Would you say that shop assistants in your country were reasonably polite and helpful? Would you say the shop assistants in your country were reasonably polite and helpful? Yes or no?
Yes.
I'd say the
I
shop
think I'd say
assistants
shop
in my
assistants
country
in my
were
country
reasonably polite
were reasonably
and
polite
helpful.
and helpful.
If someone called you on your mobile and you were otherwise engaged with something important, would you take the call? If someone called you on your mobile and you were otherwise engaged with something important, would you take the call? Yes or no?
No.
If someone
If
called me
someone
on
called
my
me
mobile
on my
and I
mobile,
was
and
otherwise
I was otherwise
engaged with something
engaged with
important,
something
I
important,
wouldn't take the call.
I wouldn't take the call.
If a car had one broken window but otherwise was in a good condition, would you buy it? If a car had one broken window but otherwise was in a good condition, would you buy it? Yes or no?
No.
If a car had
If a
one
car
broken
had
window
one broken
but
window,
otherwise
but
was in
otherwise
good
was
condition,
in good
I
condition,
wouldn't buy it.
I wouldn't buy it.
If you had to perform in a play, what kind of part would you like to perform? If you had to perform in a play, what kind of part would you like to perform? If I had to
If
perform
I
in
had
a
to
play,
perform in a
I'd
play,
like to
I'd
perform
like to
the part
perform
of.
the part of one of the sub characters.
Very good. Can you perform any magic tricks? Can you perform any magic tricks? Yes or no? I
No,
can't
I can't
perform any
perform
magic
any
tricks.
magic tricks.
Wait, name an actor who you think always gives good performances in films. Name an actor who you think always give good performances in films. An actor who
An
I think
actor who I
always
think
gives
always
good
gives good
performances in films
performances
is
in films is a Brad Pitt.
very good. What kind of people do you envy? What kind of people do you envy? I envy.
I envy the rich.
Very good. Are you envious of the fame that celebrities have? Are you envious of the fame that celebrities have? Yes or no?
No,
I'm not
not
envious of the
envious
fame that
of the
celebrities
fame
have.
that the celebrities have.
Very good. Okay, that's the end of our revision. Let's have new word. Okay, so these are noun and verb. Okay, repeat. Advice, advice.
Advice, advice.
Practice, practice.
Practice, practice.
License, license.
License, license.
Very good. Okay, listen. The difference between advice and advice, practice and license is that the nouns advice, practice, and license are spelled with the letter C and E, whereas the verbs are spelled with SE. Okay, let's practice. What's the difference between advice and advice? What's the difference between advice and advice? The difference between
The difference
advice and
between
advice
advice and
is that
advice
advice
is
is a
that
noun,
advice is a
whereas
noun,
advice is a
whereas
verb.
advice is a verb.
What's the difference in spelling between the noun practice and the verb practice? What's the difference in spelling between the noun practice and the verb practice? The difference in
The
spelling
difference in
between the
spelling
noun
between
practice
the noun
and the verb
practice and
practice
the verb
is that
practice
the noun
is
is
that the
spelled
noun
CE,
is spelled
whereas
CE,
the verb
whereas
is
the
spelled
verb
SE.
is spelled SE.
And what's the difference between the noun license and the verb license? And what's the difference between the noun license and the verb license? The difference between
The
the
difference
noun
between the
license
noun
and the verb
license and the
license
verb
is the
license
same.
is the
The
same.
noun is spelled CE,
Noun is spelled CE,
whereas the verb
whereas the
is
verb
spelled SE.
is spelled SE.
Very good. Okay, next repeat record.
Letter, a
Rec-
record,
record and record.
record.
Very good. Okay, listen. Record is a noun. So record is a noun. It means the best or fastest ever done. Guinness World of Book of World Record. For example, she set a new European record in high jump, while record is a verb. It means to store sound or moving pictures using electronic equipment so that they can be heard or seen later. For example, I have recorded my own voice. Okay, let's practice. What's the difference between the words record and record? What's the difference between the words record and record? The difference
The
between
difference
the words
between
record
the words
and
record
record
and
is that
record
record
is
is a
that
noun,
record is a
whereas
noun,
record is a
whereas
verb.
record is a verb.
Right? Can you think of any sporting record that has been broken recently? Can you think of any sporting record that has been broken recently? Yes or no? I
Yes,
can think of
I
a
can think
sporting
of
record
a sporting
that has
record
been broken
that has
recently.
been broken recently.
Which one?
Uh, it,
Swimming.
it, it wasn't that recent,
Oh, but
recent
the
record,
recently that you remembered.
but like a Bolt,
Well,
Usain Bolt broke the record, broke the world record in athletic field
oh,
in 100 meters and 200 meters.
but you,
Mm.
the fastest man on earth, right? Very good.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I remember also. Okay, have you ever recorded your own voice? Have you ever recorded your own voice? Yes or no?
No,
I've
I've
never
never
recorded my own
recorded
voice.
my own voice.
Very good. Next, repeat. Scatter,
Scatter,
plant,
plant.
roll,
Oh,
disorderly.
disorderly.
Very good. Okay, listen. Scatter is a verb. It means to move far apart from different directions. Plant is a verb. It means to put a plant into the ground or into a container of soil so it will grow. Row is a noun. It is a line of things, people, animals, etc., arranged next to each other. For example, farmers sometimes plant seed carefully in the ground in rows rather than scatter them on the land to prevent birds from eating them or the wind from blowing them away. Disorderly is an adjective. It means causing a problem, especially in a public place, by making a lot of noise or behaving violently. For example, a disorderly crowd of people scatter when the police arrive because people are afraid of being arrested or hit by the police. Let's practice. Why do farmers sometimes plant seed carefully in the ground in rows rather than just scatter them on the land? Why do farmers sometimes plant seed carefully in the ground in rows rather than just scatter them on the land? Farmers sometimes
Farmers
plant seeds
sometimes plant
carefully
seeds
in the
carefully
ground in
in the
rows
ground or in
rather
rows
than just
rather than
scatter
just
them on the land
scatter them on the
to
land
prevent birds
to
from
prevent
eating them
birds from eating
or the
them
wind from blowing
or
them
the
away.
wind from blowing them away.
Well, why does a disorderly crowd of people scatter when the police arrive? Why does a disorderly crowd of people scatter when the police arrive? A disorderly crowd
At this orderly
of
crowd
people
of
scatters
people
when the
scatters
police arrive
when the police
because
arrive
the people are
because
afraid
people are
of being
afraid
arrested
of being
or hit
arrested
by the police.
or hit by the police.
Very good. Next, repeat. Tap.
Yep.
With the letter T. Tap.
Oh, tap.
Turn on.
Turn on.
Very good. Okay, listen. Tap is a verb. It means to hit something gently and often repeatedly, especially making short, sharp noises like a tap on the shoulder. For example, I'm tapping my fingers on the table. Tap can also be a noun. It is the British term of the word faucet. It is a device that controls the flow of liquid or water from the pipe. For example, we get water from a tap. That's why it's called tap water. Turn on is a phrasal verb. It is the synonym of switch on. For example, we get water from a tap by turning it on. We normally turn a water tap on in an anti-clockwise direction. Let's practice. What am I doing? What am I doing? You're tapping your
You are
finger
tapping
on the
your
table.
finger on the table.
In which direction does one normally turn a water tap on? In which direction does one normally turn a water tap on? One normally
One
turns a
normally
water
turns
tap on
a water tap
in an
on
anti-clockwise
in
direction.
anti-clockwise direction.
Very good. Next, repeat. Pollution.
Pollution.
Polluted.
Polluted.
Very good. Okay, listen. Pollution is a noun. It means damage caused to water, air, etc. by harmful substances or waste. For example, pollution is a more serious problem now than it was 100 years ago. Polluted is an adjective of pollution. For example, some rivers in my country are heavily polluted because people throw garbage in there. Let's practice. Is pollution a more serious problem now than it was 100 years ago? Is pollution a more serious problem now than it was 100 years ago? Yes, pollution
Yes,
is a more
pollution
serious
is a
problem
more
now
serious problem
than it
now
was a
than
hundred
it
years
was a
ago.
hundred years ago.
Are most of the rivers in your country heavily polluted? Are most of the rivers in your country heavily polluted? Yes or no?
No,
Most
most
of
of
the
uh,
rivers
most of the
in
rivers
my
in my
country
country
aren't heavily polluted.
aren't heavily polluted.
Very good. Okay, now let's have idiom 36. Okay. Get the wrong end of the stick.
Get the wrong end of the stick.
Very good. Okay, listen. Get the wrong end of the stick is an idiom. It means to understand something wrongly. For example, no, you've got the wrong end of the stick. I meant next Wednesday, not this Wednesday. Let's practice. What does the idiom get the wrong end of the stick mean? What does the idiom get the wrong end of the stick mean? The idiom
The
get the
idiom
wrong end
get the
of the
wrong
stick
end of the
means
stick means
understand something
understand
wrongly.
something wrongly.
Give me an example. Give me an example, please. Every time You
Every
explain
time you
anything to
explain
him,
anything to
he
him,
always seems
he
to
always
get the wrong
sees
end
to
of the
get the
stick.
long end of the stick.
Very good. Okay, so now let's move on to reading.
Reading.
Okay, so our reading is at stage 9, paragraph page 733. Okay, and the last headword was fame. No, admiration. Let's start with
Admiration.
the headword generous.
Mm. Generous. Do you think the rich are more generous than the poor? No, I don't think the rich are more generous than the poor. What does the idiom touch and go mean? The idiom touch and go means very uncertain. Give me an example, please. The car was in very bad condition, and it was touch and go whether it would get us home or not.